It's time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A presentation of the Longines Whitnor Watch Company, maker of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnor, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines. Good evening, this is Frank Knight. May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope? Edward P. Morgan and Winston Burdett, both of the CBS television news staff. Our distinguished guest for this evening is the Honorable Prescott Bush, United States Senator from Connecticut.
Senator Bush, just the other night, a Republican colleague of yours in the House of Representatives, Congressman Hugh Scott of Philadelphia, sitting in the same seat that you're occupying now on Chronoscope, had some rather rough things to say about what he called the extreme right wing of the Republican Party. He said, in effect, that this wing was hobbling the Eisenhower administration's program and regime, and that it should stop it. What is your comment on that, sir?
Well, I noticed that Mr. Scott made remarks to that effect. My feeling was that they were a little severe and not entirely justified. I think that so often votes down there take place on what I'd call an area basis rather than a party basis, and sometimes it gives the impression that within the party there are dissidents who are making things difficult. Of course, I don't want to deny the fact that there have been some Republicans in both houses that have been a little bit reluctant to go along with some of the administration's plans and some of the Congress's ideas. Nevertheless, I feel that in any great important issues that the Republicans would pretty much stand together. I don't entirely agree with Mr. Scott.
By important issues, do you mean domestic issues, Senator, or issues of national security?
Well, I would say issues of paramount national interest, national importance that might really affect the national security and be generally recognized as issues that affect the national security.
Well, let's approach the contentious elements of the discussion from another angle, Senator.
I might say right there in that connection, further, if I may, that I can hardly think of a vote which has been what we might call a part of the Eisenhower program, and I think there are 47 votes that might be said to be votes of that character, where the Republicans didn't pretty well hang together on that. The Democrats split much more often than the Republicans did. That's a matter of record.
Yes, sir. To continue, if we may, for a moment, the contentious elements of politics, Mr. Truman interrupted a long silence the other day on Labor Day, and there was an accompanying tinkle of shattered glass, so to speak. He attacked the administration with both fists, and as I remember his speech, he said that this was a business administration and that it was not doing the public, the common people as a whole, any good, and that it would raise the interest rates, which helped money changers but not much else, and that it wasn't doing any good with public resources. Now, that's a large mouthful, but maybe you'd like to handle it piecemeal.
Well, Mr. Morgan, I read most of Mr. Truman's speech in Detroit, which is the one I presume you refer to, and to me it was very reminiscent of October 1952. It's very hard for me to believe that the people of the United States think that President Eisenhower is a tool of the selfish interest. They just won't believe that kind of charges because there's no basis of fact in them whatever. And I think the president, the ex-president, Mr. Truman, should recall when he was talking about the greedy interests or the selfish few or whatever they were, and how he classified them in this particular speech, that it was one of the issues in the 1952 campaign was to get rid of the corruption and the greed that had sort of hemmed him in and resulted in his having to dismiss 3 or 4 chairmen of the Democrat National Committee in succession because of those things.
Of course, the Democrats would come right back at you there, I suppose, and say that the Republicans were obliged in the very first few months of office to dismiss one of their own chairmen.
Yes, that's true. They might say that, but anyone that looks at the facts in that case wouldn't really consider that that was a comparable case at all.
Well, Senator,
that was right out in the open. I mean, that was Mr. Roberts. It was a very unfortunate thing. I agree, but I don't think it's comparable to the things we're thinking about at all.
Senator, on this subject of higher interest rates, I think the President gave us some cue as to the political ammunition that the Democrats will be using as they look ahead to the congressional midterm elections. You were a member of the Banking and Currency Committee, and I think most of us are men on the street when it comes to these banking matters. Do you have any man-on-the-street answer, any man-on-the-street explanation of the higher interest rate policy of the administration?
Well, the real answer to the situation is that the policy of the Eisenhower administration is to stop inflation, to return to the people a sound dollar, an honest dollar, so that when a man has saved some money, that money will be worth as much in goods and services 5 years, 10 years from now as it is the time he saved it. Now, that is the policy of the Eisenhower administration. In order to do that, one of the things they had to do was stop suppressing interest rates, which for years was done by the previous administration. One of the most inflationary things you can possibly do, as was so very well pointed out by that outstanding senator on the Democrat side, Mr. Paul Douglas of Illinois. He's the one that made the case for the policy of the Eisenhower administration in favor of stopping inflation and therefore stopping the inflationary forces. In other words, you've got to attack it at its roots and not on the surface. And that's what's happened.